Imagine standing in the middle of a dense taiga or a scorched desert and stumbling upon a rusted locomotive. It sits frozen on tracks that haven't seen a human being for centuries, with not a single hint of civilization around. These steel lifelines were designed as the ultimate triumph of engineering, capable of crushing wild nature beneath them. But a close look at geographic maps reveals dead roots where the planet took harsh revenge for our interference. For decades, official agencies blamed these massive failures on a simple lack of funds or frost heaving. But when independent experts see multi-ton rails twisted into perfect loops in just a matter of hours, those stories fall apart. We are told to believe it was an accident, but the physics of deformation indicate that the metal literally melted under colossal loads. Classified institutional archives hold dry numbers and accident reports that still terrify researchers today. Radars detect entire freight trains underground, sealed inside granite traps within seconds. Heavy carbon steel consistently lost the battle against forces that modern science cannot even calculate. Our first location is in the endless circumpolar tundra, where a chilling experiment began in 1947. This massive project was codenamed Object 501, known to the world as the Dead Road. The idea was brutally simple: to hammer a full-scale railroad through the permafrost and connect Arctic ports. The planned route was meant to securely link the remote shores of the Northern Sea Route with major industrial hubs. Tens of thousands of prisoners and colossal material resources of the Soviet state were thrown into this task. Builders worked around the clock in extreme temperatures, with winter thermometers dropping to -55 degrees. At such bitter cold, carbon steel became brittle and fragile, just like ordinary thin window glass. Over the years of grueling labor, more than 800 kilometers of track were laid, and depots and bridges were built. However, Soviet civil engineers made a fatal, irreversible mistake in the fundamental thermodynamics of polar soils. They completely ignored the complex laws of hydrology and the cyclical freezing of deep permafrost layers. With the arrival of the short polar summer, the top layer of permafrost melted, turning into a boundless, liquid swamp. This massive slurry of meltwater was completely devoid of any load-bearing capacity for heavy trains. The underlying hydrostatic pressure of freezing and thawing ice began to rapidly and mercilessly destroy the infrastructure. Heavy Siberian rails of the special R-43 grade warped into vertical waves the height of a grown man. The steel lines of the main track twisted into unpassable arcs under the destructive impact of soil deformation. Multi-ton earthen embankments dissolved completely into mire, along with the wooden ties and track spikes. Solid bridge piers, unable to withstand the constant shifting of the ground, snapped under the pressure of their own colossal weight. To hold the track in place, engineers tried to apply experimental methods of artificial thermal insulation on the collapsing slopes. They laid special, multi-layered mats of peat and dense moss, but this only slowed down the cascading collapse. The physics of freezing soil deformation proved much stronger than human stubbornness and the totalitarian will of the builders. In 1953, the ambitious project was hastily liquidated by order of the highest leadership. All design documents and accident reports were immediately placed on archive shelves under the stamp of top secret. On the closed, permanently blocked dead-end tracks in the middle of the deep tundra, 3 evacuation trains still stand today. A vast ocean of Siberian taiga completely cut these abandoned train sets off from the nearest pockets of civilization. All the wooden and old metal bridges behind them have long since collapsed into the impassable, mucky swamp mire. The steel giants, led by frozen OV series steam locomotives, are slowly sinking beneath a thick layer of polar moss. They rust away without the slightest chance of recovery, serving as a reminder of the total collapse of Arctic construction. But while in the Arctic, machinery was destroyed by the physics of water and ice, things went differently in the Urals. In the deep forests of the Ural region, rails and trains were erased from history by direct orders of defense agencies. We are talking about the Chertkov log area, where a strictly classified branch line was built at the height of the Cold War. On civilian maps for public use, this railroad route was marked as an unremarkable, simple dead-end track. The official institutional version claimed the line was used exclusively for the mass transport of industrial timber. The true purpose of the facility was to provide covert logistics for deep underground bunkers and secret factories. This entire colossal military-industrial complex was securely hidden inside a monolithic and durable granite mountain. The railroad tracks ran directly into massive reinforced concrete portals cut deep into the rock face. The entrances were equipped with multi-ton blast doors capable of fully withstanding a direct nuclear strike. Trains regularly delivered heavy pressing equipment and high-precision machine tools for the secret defense industry inside. Materials for processing radioactive elements in special sealed lead containers were also transported deep into the mountain. In the early 90s, due to changes in the geopolitical situation, the decision was made to mothball the hub. Mutual disarmament treaties forced the military to urgently shut down all secret production inside the mountain range. However, instead of a standard dismantling of the rail tracks, engineers used a tactic of total and permanent destruction. All massive entrances to the underground complexes were blasted by a series of powerful, directional-shaped charges. The blast wave completely destroyed the load-bearing pillars and triggered an instant collapse of the granite rock mass inside. The tunnel vaults caved in completely at a depth of over 300 meters under the colossal pressure of the rock. The targeted explosion forever isolated the secret underground halls and transport galleries from the surface of the Earth. The most terrifying part came decades later, when independent researchers conducted a detailed scan of this restricted area. They used modern high-frequency ground-penetrating radars capable of piercing thick layers of granite and basalt. The instruments recorded clear and undeniable outlines of massive metal structures beneath the colossal, multi-ton debris. There, in the total darkness of the buried tunnels, entire untouched freight trains still stand covered in decades of dust. All their flat cars and wagons are tightly packed with unknown heavy containers meant for strategic defense purposes. The trains entered the secure perimeter just 2 hours before military engineers activated the detonators. Engineering reports regarding the subsequent fate of the locomotive crews remain classified by defense agencies to this day. The Chertkov log territory itself remains a restricted zone protected by automated surveillance systems and motion sensors. The desire to control vast territories with rails and automation led to disasters on the other side of the planet as well. In 1967, the U.S. military command faced the urgent need to completely block the enemy's logistics. Supplies moved through the impassable tropical forests of Southeast Asia, completely hidden from airstrikes. This massive and incredibly expensive project entered military history under the codename McNamara Line. Pentagon engineers attempted to create a unique, automated narrow-gauge railroad that operated completely without drivers. Thousands of high-tech acoustic, seismic, and infrared tracking sensors were covertly placed along the tracks. The devices recorded the slightest vibrations of the damp forest soil and minor temperature changes in the coverage zone. Special robot trains, controlled remotely from central communications bunkers, were supposed to patrol the segments around the clock. Their mission was to automatically drop cluster mines in areas where the sensors detected human footsteps. This was the pinnacle of American engineering mind, with billions of dollars spent from the defense budget. But the creators of the innovative system made a fundamental mistake, completely underestimating the aggressiveness of Earth's tropical biosphere. The arrival of the heavy monsoon rainy season turned the high-tech project into a cascading and irreversible engineering collapse. 100% air humidity and constant contact with the acidic, porous soil completely destroyed the insulation of underground cables. The complex microchips and sensor transmitters failed entirely after just 30 days of operation. Aggressive acid vapors rapidly corroded copper contacts and disrupted the transmission of high-frequency signals to command posts. But the most crushing blow to the American steel highway was dealt by the complex, shifting geomorphology of the tropical region. Colossal rain torrents completely washed away the porous soils, triggering massive tectonic shifts and land slumps. Entire railroad segments, along with tracking stations and heavy diesel generators, plunged into deep ravines. The depth of these suddenly formed forest chasms reached 50 meters, completely wiping out the track outposts. Wild nature fully assimilated the alien metal, turning the complex military system into a natural part of the wild jungle. The rails became covered in a thick layer of rust and were tightly strangled by tough tropical vines and green moss. The automated robot trains turned into heaps of mangled scrap metal at the very bottom of impassable forest gorges. The McNamara Line became a clear example of how an aggressive environment completely destroys advanced military infrastructure. While the moisture of the jungle dissolved metal gradually, on the sheer glaciers of Alaska, trains were destroyed by primal chaos. The White Pass Railroad, built during the gold rush in 1898, still terrifies researchers today. This winding mountain route is still officially considered one of the most dangerous engineering structures on the planet. Builders had to manually carve a narrow track into steep granite cliffs and ancient ice masses. For the work, they used only primitive hand tools, heavy pickaxes, and dangerous, unstable yellow dynamite charges. Due to the tight constraints of the harsh mountain landscape, trains were forced to climb incredibly steep passes. The grade of the tracks reached a record 4%, which was exactly double the allowed safety limits for traffic. Heavy old freight trains, loaded to the brim with gold ore and construction materials, moved at the absolute limit of locomotive power. The drama reached its peak in the winter period, when polar temperatures in Alaska dropped to -45 degrees. Hurricane-force Arctic winds covered the steel track and track switches with a layer of perfect, smooth, and slippery ice. The physics of friction completely stopped working under these extreme conditions, leaving the trains with zero control. The adhesion coefficient of the heavy steel wheels on the icy, frozen rails dropped practically to absolute zero. The metal of the brake shoes became brittle from sharp temperature drops and instantly cracked during attempts to brake. The air brake line turned into a useless chain of ruptured tubes, completely unable to stop the multi-ton speeding train. Company archives record horrific historical cases where trains completely lost mechanical traction with the tracks on the pass. Under its own immense weight, the heavy train would begin an uncontrolled and rapid backwards descent down the steep cliffside. The runaway trains built up massive speeds exceeding 60 miles per hour, flying backward along the winding mountain switchbacks. On sharp turns, the colossal centrifugal force simply threw the heavy locomotives and cars off the high, icy embankment. Multi-ton steam engines plummeted at full speed into the deep abyss of the bleak Dead Horse Gulch. Today, hundreds of tons of mangled and twisted black metal lie quietly at the bottom of this deep stone canyon. Torn wheel sets, bent axles, and flattened boilers of old locomotives are physically impossible to bring back up to the surface. The sheer 300-foot walls of the canyon completely rule out the use of cranes, leaving the machinery to rot among eternal ice. From the extreme cold of Alaska, we travel to the exact opposite and equally brutal climatic conditions. Welcome to the driest, most scorched, and lifeless place on our planet, the Atacama Desert in South America. Here, amid sun-baked white salt flats, lies a completely abandoned, rusting railroad line from the 19th century. It was heavily constructed by international mining syndicates to export colossal volumes of valuable and expensive raw materials. Millions of tons of saltpeter and heavy copper ore were transported around the clock along these tracks through the sands to the Pacific coast. Large labor settlements and wooden towns that sprang up along the tracks died out completely after the deposits were depleted. All the buildings and abandoned houses turned into silent ghosts, halfway buried by fine sand and corrosive desert salt dust. Today, the old rusted rails cross an absolutely empty, dead territory where not a single drop of rain has fallen for decades. However, this railroad is notable for a unique physical phenomenon that terrifies the rare researchers who visit. Due to the total lack of cloud cover in the Atacama, extreme diurnal air temperature fluctuations occur. Temperatures swing wildly from plus 113 degrees at scorching noon to absolute zero right after sunset. The laws of thermal expansion exert a colossal, continuous, and destructive impact on the long steel rails. During the day, under the blazing and blinding sun, the metal expands to its absolute limit, increasing its length at every joint. At night, with the arrival of freezing air, the steel contracts sharply and unevenly, creating powerful internal mechanical stress. The stress continuously builds up in the crystal lattice of the alloy, leading to a cascading deformation of the entire rail line. Because of this, with the onset of deep twilight, the abandoned highway begins to emit a continuous, deafening metallic cracking. A strange, eerie hum and sharp metallic grinding echo through the silent night desert for miles around. The stressed steel literally tears itself apart without any human involvement whatsoever. Heavy steel bolt connections of the track spikes snap and fly apart with a distinct sound resembling sharp rifle shots. Old wooden ties, completely dried out by the Atacama sun, crack in half under the force of these massive metal shifts. Over decades, the physics of thermal shock turned a straight track into a chaotic pattern of mangled and bent iron. As you look along the ruined tracks, it's clear that no modern train will ever be able to run on these deformed rails again. While the steel in the desert gets destroyed by temperature swings, the camera moves deep underground, where a different force kills the rails. Beneath the streets of the world's largest megacities hide abandoned tracks, crushed by the heavy hydrostatic pressure of groundwater. In London, beneath the historic brick-built Paddington district, lies an extensive and gloomy network of old abandoned tunnels. These are the tracks of the secret post office railway and the very first lines of the underground city transit system in the dark. The old, rust-covered underground routes were completely taken out of service and permanently sealed with massive steel blast doors. Historical footage shows that the reason for this emergency mothballing was gross miscalculations by British engineers of the Victorian era. During design, they completely misanalyzed the geological layers and the density of the treacherous London clay. The underground transit tunnels were dug in immediate proximity to powerful and shifting subterranean aquifers. Over time, due to the constant, powerful mechanical vibrations from passing trains, the first microcracks appeared in the brick arches. Through these invisible defects at a depth of 100 feet, groundwater burst into the tunnel in powerful streams. Attempts to pump out the subterranean liquid using heavy pumping stations yielded absolutely no positive results. Water continuously poured in at a rate of several hundred liters per minute, completely erasing the solid concrete base of the tracks. Deep voids formed beneath the ties, causing entire segments to sag and triggering dangerous deformation of the cast iron lining segments. Cracks ran up the brick facades on the surface. This created a real threat of sudden collapse for the old historic buildings above. In an emergency move, the failing Paddington branch line was completely flooded with dark water and isolated from the active subway system. Workers in the tunnel carried out a massive emergency injection of liquid concrete into critical nodes to stop further soil failure. The most intriguing part is that modern urban explorers with powerful flashlights regularly record strange phenomena in these closed sectors. From behind the locked, rust-coated blast doors, low-frequency vibrations and a distant, faint clicking of train wheels can be clearly heard. A researcher reviews official engineering maps of London, which categorically deny the presence of any locomotives in this sealed sector. A dark silhouette of a train in a flooded tunnel. This forces independent researchers to build chilling theories about secret military operations. Errors in material strength calculations led to massive tragedies in the conditions of humid, oppressive colonial Asia as well. The famous bridge over the River Kwai entered world transport history, becoming the central part of the Death Railway. This line between Thailand and Burma was actively erected during World War II by the exhausted forces of Allied prisoners of war. Construction took place under the nightmarish conditions of an unbearable tropical hell, deadly diseases, and a total lack of resources. New tracks laid literally cost a human life due to the grueling labor. The main engineering tragedy unfolded during the construction of colossal, high wooden trestles over deep and rushing river canyons. Due to a total lack of fastening metal and heavy machinery, the bridges were assembled by hand from green teak wood and bamboo. Massive structural elements high up were secured together using only primitive, thick hemp ropes and wooden dowels. Heavy rains poured down. The designers completely failed to realize that green timber under constant moisture starts to rot from the inside. Due to the rapid multiplication of aggressive fungi, the dense teak timber lost up to 70% of its strength in just a few months. Externally, the massive wooden piers looked solid, but their internal structure was quietly turning into brittle, hollow rot. The very first attempt to run heavy, black Japanese military transport locomotives across the bridge ended in an absolute disaster. The weakened green wooden support structures groaned and snapped, failing to withstand the colossal static and dynamic loads of the heavy train. The high trestle crashes down, turning the bottom of the wild River Kwai into a giant, bleak graveyard of old military machinery. Multi-ton wooden rail cars and wagons plummeted from a height of 100 feet, dragging tons of structural debris down with them. Today, these rusted metal hulls of wagons and wheels still lie underwater, halfway buried by dark river silt. They remain a silent and harsh monument to engineering helplessness against physics. While bridges in Asia collapsed due to rotting wood, on the Urals the tracks were destroyed by a sudden and hidden tectonic threat. The Ural Rift is an abandoned, grass-covered segment laid through dangerous areas undergoing active leaching of limestone rocks. Subterranean thermal waters spent centuries carving out colossal caverns and complex networks of deep caves in the soft, light rock. The construction of the ore-hauling branch line was carried out in the mid-20th century by Soviet workers without any deep soil study. Geologists with old instruments performed only shallow surface drilling, completely missing the giant voids right under the future track path. Heavy freight train sets of the Soviet era roll along the line, creating a constant and powerful vibrational load that accelerated the cave vault's collapse. In the end, the thinned, fragile limestone shell of one of the underground caves completely failed under the weight of a heavy train. An archival historical shot. A track walker in uniform with a lantern in hand looks on in shock at the complete disappearance of 1,500 feet of track. The earth opened up in the middle of the Ural taiga, forming a perfect circular crater over 600 feet wide with sheer granite walls. Looking down into the depths of the sudden chasm, a subterranean river roared and foamed violently at the very bottom. The railroad bed caved in just 2 hours before a scheduled train arrived, which the engineer managed to stop at the very last second. All desperate attempts by engineers to fill the karst sinkhole with tons of rock and liquid concrete ended in total and absolute failure. The loose soil keeps rapidly sliding deep into the earth, swallowing heavy crawler bulldozers and construction equipment without a trace. In the end, the dangerous Ural line was completely dismantled, and the giant empty hole in the forest still terrifies rare eyewitnesses. Beneath our cities and tracks, voids could be hiding, ready to swallow infrastructure in minutes. We have reached the final point of our journey, the most ambitious project of the 20th century. The famous Polar Railway, located in the deepest, wildest, and unexplored regions of the snow-covered northern tundra. Huge black rails disappear into the blizzard. This route was designed as a superhighway capable of operating reliably in absolute record Arctic cold. In winter, polar temperatures there regularly drop below -76. In such bitter cold, the structure of standard carbon steel undergoes irreversible changes. The metal snaps from a light tap. Rail steel completely loses its natural plasticity and becomes as brittle as dry technical ceramics. Engineers at a secret plant cast metal, using innovative technology to alloy the rails with nickel, valuable manganese, and chromium for protection. Heavy train wheels roll over special shiny rails. This was supposed to completely prevent dangerous fatigue microcracks from forming under weight. However, the ambitious Polar project ran into a relentless, powerful obstacle of a complex geological and tectonic nature. Huge layers of permafrost in this sector turned out to be unstable due to the constant shifting and pressure of massive underground ice lenses. A concrete railroad tie cracks loudly in half. The ground beneath the tracks moved continuously at a rate of several inches per day. The final crushing collapse occurred during a violent polar blizzard, as a massive Soviet locomotive giant pushed through the snow at max power. A heavy freight train weighing over 200 tons ground to a screeching halt as it hit a sudden vertical shift in the icy tracks on a blind curve. The massive wheel sets of the locomotive instantly jumped the rails into a snowdrift, leaving the huge steel machine dead in its tracks in the white desert. A frozen hand in a fur mitten tries to throw the emergency engine reverse inside the cab, but the wheels are completely jammed and frozen in thick ice. The locomotive crew in polar gear hastily abandons the cab to save their own lives due to a cascading failure of the train's air brake system. Today, this massive, frozen steel giant still stands completely alone in the middle of a boundless, empty, and freezing white plain. Frost-covered needle of the old iron throttle lever remains frozen forever in the full ahead position. The rusted and bent tracks around the abandoned locomotive are twisted by tectonic forces into bizarre dead loops. These 9 dead roots clearly prove that any human technology fades before the laws of physics. We can build massive multi-ton trains and cast the strongest steel, but wild nature always finds hidden vulnerabilities in our engineering calculations. The swamps of the Arctic tundra, the intense thermal shock of the Atacama Desert, deep karst voids, and relentless tropical humidity. The result is identical. Looking at these trains, we clearly see that each one is a grim warning to future engineers. We are obligated to precisely calculate all consequences of our heavy interference with Earth's ecosystem. Otherwise, our most advanced cities, factories, and transport lines will turn into silent ruins. Let me know in the comments which of these steel highways shocked you most. Subscribe to our channel because we have many more geographic mysteries to uncover, dissolving into the horizon fog. Until next time on the dead and abandoned tracks of history.